Makes sense.
So basically what you do is you take the penny and you're going to want to tape it down, pulling the electrical tape. Like that. You want to do it once from either side, crossing over. So.
What is your shaft made of?
It's kite spar. That's the 610 that you can't get anymore.
I'll look into that. I'm not still be able to
You
get
can find it, definitely. Get some.
because the lady I deal with
You collar it.
has like 30 different types of kite spar.
You want to be pulling the tape to the point that it's actually stretching. That's good for this sort of thing. You don't want to do that when you use electrical tape anywhere else.
You do it one strip across the top and then you wrap it?
Make an X. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, that's what I did now with this.
Then wrap it, and then do that again.
Oh wow.
Because you really want that penny to never...
I didn't stretch it when I taped this, so it's not like it's compressing the foam on it. Just
What's
hold
the
it.
penny
Just
for?
hold it.
Penny is to keep it from ever being able to core. That way the penny will never push through the foam like the sharp edges of the kite spar would. You
Just
can
because
file them down.
it's blunt or
Right,
soft
because
or
it's
whatever?
blunt, yeah. So. And then by the time you're done, the penny shouldn't move at all. So basically then you cut small sections of climate tube. This is exactly the same as making an arrow. And you push that down onto the tip, leaving enough space for about 2 small squares of this 1/2-inch thickness.
And what kind of foam is that?
Your standard closed cell marine foam, gray, 1/2-inch thick. You want the squares to be slightly larger than the, I mean obviously it's a square and a round hole, but still you want it slightly larger so they don't
overlap.
You want to have to push it down tight. Right up like that. I didn't realize there was water in the house. So then you force the 2 of them in until they're flush, and then at this point you're going to do the same thing we did with the penny. Put 2 over and collar it. So we're not going to do that a second time.
Till the tape stretches.
Well, at this point you're not really going to stretch it that much.
Okay. So just on there good, but not on there too good.
Yeah, I'll show you in a second. You don't want to compress the foam too much, at least not on the top. So you want to just sort of a little bit so that you pull in the sides of the climate tube a bit, but not so tight that it's going to compress the foam that's in the middle. Again, you definitely use electrical tape for this, not only because it stretches, but because it's lighter. That tape weighs a lot more. Then you start up near the top, winding it around. Pull this fairly tight, especially for a thrusting tip of a sword, because we didn't leave ourselves a lot of width here. This is only 1.5 inches thick,
Right.
so this has to be slightly thinner or it's going to protrude from the side of the sword. And that can definitely help. And drop like that. The important thing is not to tape down the climate tube ahead of time, because you want to make sure that you can fit both of the little squares in and have them be flush at the top.
2 squares?
2 squares.
Okay.
So you're actually going to have 1 inch of foam above the penny in the climate tube. The trick here is to cut without poking through the foam on the outside.
So you trace, you take the core, put it on top and trace?
Trace the socket. Yeah, so I know roughly what size hole I'm cutting.
Like a so?
I mean, it's foam, it's flexible, you know, I can force it in there.
Do you have to make sure that you're leaving an edge?
Yeah, you don't want it to poke out on the side. That
Okay.
tends to
How
affect
much edge?
Just so it fits. In fact, sometimes I would use the 2-inch thick foam so that there was no question it was going to fit. But those make for bulky swords. So I'm trying to, this is what my dagger is made
So
of.
if it blows out here,
It's not really a good idea to have it do that, yeah.
so you got to have extra.
I put a little mark on the blade so I know how deep I want to go. It's roughly the same. So
How
I'll clean that off
deep do you
later.
want to
The depth of the socket, roughly.
go? The entire depth of the socket?
Mm-hmm. Again, I mean, it's foam, it's flexible, so you've got some wiggle room. All right, now it's time to cut it in half. Well, actually, I'll cut this other out first.
All right, so you haven't removed any foam. You cut the circle, but you don't remove the foam?
No, you don't remove the foam because it's still attached at the bottom. I cut a circle
Oh, you just
around.
cut
Right.
the deep.
Right, and then when I cut it in half, I'll be able to scoop it out the rest of the way. You'll see what I mean. All right, I'm going to cut these in half now. I already marked a line down the center, so. Cutting from the top. this foam around the block, so it's a little tough at the end. At this point, you can scoop out the socket.
Are you going to do that same scooping maneuver all the way down?
Yeah, I'll show you in a minute when she gets done with that. This doesn't have to be exact here, this just has to be rough.
This is where the core is going?
I'm just going to make little, like, light score marks so it's easier to pull out with my fingers. Eventually, the pieces will snap together like this neatly.
And you use what to keep them together?
Contact cement. Now I'm going to paint them with contact cement.
And there's no bulge from the...
Not really, no, very little.
This is the boring part. Slathering on contact cement.
In other words, exactly the same as dapping.
Exactly the same. Well, yeah, just dapping.
That's a lot of glue.
It is, but it's under a lot of stress when you're swinging it.
Do you let the glue sit for a while before you attach it?
Yeah, you gotta let it sit for about 20 minutes at least.
So it gets tacky and bonds, or...
For, you know, at least 48 hours, preferably several days, like a week or so is really good. You know, people try to make their weapons and then fight with them the next day, and yeah, it's glued and all, but it hasn't really cured as much as it will if you give it more time, so weapons last a lot longer if you make them one week and then fight with them the next.
So after you put them together, leave them?
After you put them together and sew the cover and do all that happy shit, don't fight with it for like a week. See? This also keeps the side from ever blowing out.
A strip of tape along the seam. It's purely a matter of preference, but I find it just helps hold it together a little bit. So. Alright, now it's time for the tips.
Yeah, but I really like the weight of the fiberglass.
So then you cut the bolster into sections, and then you cut the bottom off so it's flat and lay across the top of the blade.
That's it?
Basically, put a piece over the top, piece over the side, and then collar it. That's all you need to do. You don't want to pull it too tight because you don't want to compress it. And when they blow off, they don't core because, you know...
Right, the core's not above
Right.
that thing.
So it's not really dangerous when it happens. And it's really obvious when it happens too, unlike some of the other swords where they bend and the core starts poking through and then you stab them with a pipe. You know, this way it's not very much of an issue at all. You want to leave areas on the side
So the
of
air
foam
will
so that
bleed
the air actually comes out when you stab, so it
and sucks
compresses.
back in.
Just duct taping it down to the core a little bit. I mean, it's so dapped throughout here that it probably wouldn't tear loose, but eventually it might. So now I'm probably going to put a strip of hockey tape, hockey grip tape, down the blade just to keep it from tearing.